Hey, Leonard, can we make sure we agendize decaf coffee for the next meeting? Just in the process.
I'll write it down.
To the chair. Sure.
Oh, okay. Oh,
January 27th, 2014 meeting of the Sewer Authority Midcoastside Board of Directors is called to order. Roll call, please.
Director Kowalczyk,
Present.
Director Alfano,
Here.
Chair Warren,
Present.
Vice Chair Harvey,
Present.
Director Boyd,
Here.
and Director Loman.
back from absence, yes.
Please stand for the
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, I'm getting Windows updates. I'll be here in an hour or so.
Bill, you want to speak on, not on the agenda? Okay, Bill Keegan.
Is that up? No?
Thank you, directors. Over the weekend, there was this incident by my house, by actually my neighbor's house, a couple doors away, where the sewer line that goes down Vermont goes down a gully down to Sunshine Valley Road, and it obviously backed up and overflowed, and of course, he being the lucky one right next to it saw it. In the course of the conversation, he called me up today because he thought maybe I could do something about the MCC. And I said, well, it just so happened I'm going to go to the SAM board meeting, but those are the guys that need to know. And his issue was, first of all, they came out right away Sunday afternoon. I was surprised to see the truck there, and so, good response time, and they did the right thing. But in the course of just talking with them, he found out that they don't have a camera, and he thought that was an issue because he said to me, next to police and fire, probably the other big issue of any kind of a disaster or calamity would be sewer backup and the biohazard that comes out of that. So that was one issue. I have talked to Tony. I know he's trying to get it in the budget. So I guess I'll give him 2 people that support him in more speech for the next time you're going through on the budget. Turned out it was a tree root, and maybe they would have captured it ahead of time, maybe not, who knows. The other thing he brought up, and I also talked to Tony about it ahead of time, but it was sort of a surprise to me that they just wash it down with water, and for all the various reasons, and you guys probably know this more than I do. But that swell, first of all, a lot of kids from Morse Beach Islands use that as a shortcut down to Etheldor to grab the Samtrans bus to the high school and the middle school. So, I was surprised. I asked them if they used any kind of disinfectant or something like that. Obviously, you don't want that to linger around and maybe kids step in it or touch it or any of that kind of junk. Again, I'm sure you're following all the EPA standards, but I just sort of want to raise that as something that needs to be extra cautious, because even though it just looks like it's a not well-used path, there are a lot of kids that do use it, and of course it does wash down to Sunshine Valley Road and to, I think it's San Vicente Creek that runs along the side of that, but whichever creek it is. So I've got the answers. I'm going to bring that back to him from Tony, but I fully support a need for a camera so you can do preventative maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you state your name?
Oh, yeah, Tom, Bill Keith, and my phone number's on there too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Randy, it's on the agenda, but you didn't indicate which agenda item? this one,
Kilo ditch.
okay. Let's do 2A, special order today, election of SAM officers. So I will open nominations for SAM board chair.
As we do that, I want to thank Chair Warren for leading the charge in last year. You did a great job, so thank you for that.
Thanks.
You want another go?
Well, that would be fine with me, but
You want to spread the
probably
vote?
should do the rotation.
I think in keeping with long-standing tradition, the rotation, it's time to rotate the dial a notch. I'd like to nominate Jim Harvey for chair. I'll second that.
Well, nominations don't require a second. Any other nominations?
Thank you for doing it anyway.
All
Only if he
right.
promises decaf coffee.
Hearing no further nominations, I'll close the nominations and ask for a motion to elect Jim Harvey chair by acclamation.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Last chance.
Any abstentions?
You go, Jim.
All yours. So if you want to reorder the agenda, see what the board wants to do.
Well,
We have other officers.
yeah, let's go through the other officers.
right.
So, we have the nominations for vice chair.
What's the order?
I think the order is that, which, you want to nominate one of the, which members do you want to nominate?
This is where protocol's kind of not so clear.
I think that if we're going to continue the rotational order, if we ignore the fact that Marina squatted on the position for years, it's probably after Bay's turn, I think. Who was chair before me? Was it you?
No.
It's me.
Okay, so then it's Montera's turn for vice chair.
Yeah, so we're not obligated to follow the routine. I think it makes sense for us to follow the traditional order.
Sure.
Okay, so Jim is the chair. I'm out of it today, obviously, so it is Kathleen Bay's turn for vice chair since Montera has the chair.
I'd like to nominate Mike for vice chair.
Who?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just go home right now.
Okay, Granada.
I said no coffee.
There's some good stuff happening
The other
in
one.
Granada tonight, apparently.
Mike, how do you feel about that? Actually, my middle name, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
I knew that.
That's okay.
Alan to be vice chair.
Move to close
Well, I
nomination.
understand that we don't do seconds, so I'll save that for the motion.
I move to close nominations, which doesn't require a motion if the chair is on the wall.
Excuse me, for those of us in the overflow portion of the audience, if you could speak a little louder, we'd appreciate it. We can't even see to read your lips.
No new taxes.
Thank you.
Okay, so Alan Olifano has been nominated and seconded for vice chair. Do we
Close nominations, that's for a motion.
we'll close nomination? That's for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Secretary.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
So by universal acclamation. Right, so we have a secretary and treasurer, and that's
There's
one.
actually two different offices, the memo hasn't been updated. Remember we did a JPA amendment?
That's a lot of offices.
We did a JPA amendment a couple of years ago to separate out and elevate treasurer to be a full officer position previously in the original
So
JPA agreement. had to be-
the point of this was that the chair can't be treasurer. So we can combine the two, or we can have them reside with two different people.
You could probably also do it so that the chair can't be secretary either.
But I would suggest that Renata take the post of secretary treasurer.
That makes sense.
Go for it.
Right.
I nominate
Do I
Rick
have
Loman.
the power to get decaf coffee next time?
The treasurer has a big influence over
Let's
decaf.
go for it.
Yeah.
I nominate Rick Loman for secretary, for dual role.
I move that we close nominations and
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion for
The-
Secretary Treasurer.
I move.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This may be
Good job, Rick.
world land speed record for this day.
We'll do it again. All right, you know, let's go ahead and go on to 2B, and then we'll talk about reordering the agenda after that. So, special order of the day, Sam OQED Actuary Study, Presenter Steve Littleson. Steve?
Hi, yes.
Now, we
Nice to be here.
We didn't tell them there's a limit on the number of acronyms in one staff report.
I tried to spell them out the first time and put the letters in parentheses, and hope that you start at the beginning of the report.
But there's one paragraph here, I think I should be.
I'm gonna mostly rely on you asking questions. I'm gonna just give a quick summary of what's in this full report. It's now required, and has been for an agency your size for a few years now, to gradually expense the cost of retiree health benefits. An employee who is 50 years old could retire today, or a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 15 or 20 years from now. And once they do retire, you've not, if you wait until the point of retirement, you haven't properly expensed the benefit, it's part of the compensation. Here, your retiree health benefits were cut back since the last actuarial study. Your benefit is, you'll pay $115 a month of the premium, and that amount is not going to increase, it's now frozen at $115. Employees hired beginning in 2013 are not in this plan. There's one such employee. That person's benefit is, we will deposit 1.5% of pay into an account. So I have not included that benefit. It's not an actuarial calculation involving present values and probabilities. So using those, you could say essentially every employee has been split into 1 million pieces. And some of those pieces unfortunately die this year, and some retire and some quit. But most stay till next year, when they could go through the same set of, you might retire, you might die, you might go out on disability retirement, or you might leave for some other reason. This generates a expected cash flow of benefits and a present value thereof, and an allocation of part of that to this year. What's earned this year. What's attributable to the past is being spread out over 27 years into the future. It started at 30 years, or it could have started at 30 years. Your prior study was something done by the alternative measurement method, not a real actuarial method. The people who did the calculation are unavailable to answer questions. So all I can say is my results are consistent with several other clients that have similar benefit structures here in California. You've already put $86,000 on your balance sheet of liability for this plan, and this plan is closed to people hired after 2012. So you have a set of 5 retirees and 10 employees who will get $115 a month towards their health benefits. This plan has a cost allocated to this year of about $15,000. The expense is $14,995. The expense is composed of several components. The biggest one is the actuarially required contribution, ARC, which is 16,700. The other two components are interest and amortization on your, and they are one added, one subtracted. So the net result of those is negative because you already have such a large amount of liability on your balance sheets. The calculations don't need any assumption about benefits going up because they're not related to premiums or to the PERS minimum as they once were. Other than that, I've applied the probabilities that PERS uses in computing your pension costs. Probabilities for retirement and termination depend on age and service. This is a massive array of probabilities to apply to a group of 10 people to try to predict when they'll retire and how long they'll live after retirement, and whether they'll decide 15 years from now that the benefit is too small and decline it. My cost results show include a 15-year projection. The number of retirees grows from 5 as of last June 30th up to 10. Of your current 10 employees, only one is under age 47. Since I'm assuming 20% decline benefits, that means like 7 of the other 9 will take the benefits. And in the next 15 years, a couple of the retirees are predicted to die. So you have 5 retirees now, and I'm predicting over the next 15 years, 9 more people will retire, but 2 of them will pass on the benefits, and a couple of people, the oldest ones, are the most likely to die, but until you reach 110, we're not 100% certain you're going to die, and we're applying a probability. You're an 80-year-old male. You're not 50% likely to die at 80 years old for males. You're 5.27% likely to die. 5.27% of males age 80 are predicted to die before age 81. That's in the appendices on page 13 where I've got the mortality tables. Rather than to go into too much detail, because there's tons of it, let me hear what you'd like to talk about.
I have one question before you get too far away from it. You mentioned that the assumption is that 2 of the retirees wouldn't take the benefits. What would be a reason why they would choose not to take the benefits?
Yeah, well, it's a medical benefit, so you have to be paying a premium, and the retiree would be paying more than half of the premium. Some retirees, especially, you have 5 current retirees, but by 10 years from now, the people who might just be retiring 10 years from now and might be looking at a Medicare coordinated premium that's gone from around $300 now to more than $400 and decide that they'd rather go to some other marketplace and therefore decline their benefit. The thing about actuarial work is that it's, in a sense, aiming at a distant target, and the distant target is way less predictable than planets orbiting the sun. And every 3 years we look and say, oh, let's adjust our aim. Look, 5 people have retired and every one of them took benefits. Well, now we know how many retirees there are. A fraction of one person is expected to die, one retiree is expected to die. That's not going to happen. Either someone's going to die or no one's going to die. Not 7.3 of one person. But that's a probabilistic approach, and things are rounded off in my tables because it's kind of silly to show an impossible to be true prediction that, oh, you'll have 7.3 retirees. So it's not any one person, by the way. I'm not predicting that Ms. Touré declines the benefit. I'm predicting that a little bit of everybody declines the benefit.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, please.
So Steve, this is basically just health benefits.
That's right, it's only the health benefit.
Our pensions through PERS.
And PERS has an actuarial staff to do pension work, and they have this set of possible benefits. I believe your agency has 2% at 55. There are some other formulas. There are some options that PERS has available.
But tonight, all we're looking at is health.
Yes.
Okay.
And
So-
the benefit, they don't do the health
Right,
actuarial work.
I got that.
Yeah.
So the only question I had, on the bottom of page 1, you're saying the expense for 12-13 is 15,000, the ARC is, say, 17,000.
Yeah.
The only question I have is the unfunded accrued liability of 166,000.
Right.
I just need a little clarification of what that is.
Okay. If you are already retired, it's the present value of your future benefits. Should I explain that? Because I suspect maybe all board members know, but maybe not all people here know. Should I explain that or just move from there?
But yes, what I'm really interested in is, if you can help me here, I think, if I'm reading this right, you're saying we've already planned on 15,000 for the current fiscal year.
For 3 years, it's based on the same set of numbers.
Okay.
The 16,700 plus the adjustments, and those adjustments will depend on what actually happens. Did someone retire or not?
So I'm fine with that. Then my question to you is, of the $166,000, how do we concern ourselves with that unfunded part?
Okay, you are gradually taking care of that under the current rules. You're transferring it to your balance sheet over the 27 years left on this amortization period by charging an expense that's greater than the cash outflow of benefits.
So we're paying it down?
You're paying it down.
Okay, so,
And you're paying it down over a 27-year period because GASB allows you to do that. You could opt to pay it down faster, but actuarial liabilities are not like real liabilities. You changed benefits and reduced liabilities because you're no longer promising to increase benefits an average of about 4% per year. The $115 is now frozen. It would have been $119 this year, and I'd be assuming 4% increases because it was the PERS statutory minimum benefit, and that's assumed to increase. So a liability when you buy something is way different than an actuarial liability because the actuarial ones are probabilistic. It's the past service part. If an employee is going to work 25 years, 15, but now, well, I'm going to switch to 30 to make it easier. If an employee is going to work here 30 years, and so far they've worked 15, they're halfway through. The present value of their future benefits might not start. They might not start the benefit for 5 more years. But there's a present value for that lifetime benefit, and half of it is being allocated to the past if you're gonna retire with 30 years of service. You might be someone who has 15 right now, and maybe you're old enough that you could retire right now. The 15 would be over 15 if you were to retire right now. Not very likely. Maybe you'll retire next year, or the year after, or the year after. If you have 15 years, 15 30ths, half of your present value of what you'd get if you waited till then. This is a standard actuarial method that allocates cost by service. So we gradually accrue the cost of the benefit over the working lifetime. If you had a new employee with this benefit, there would be no past service liability, and you'd be charging that person's year-by-year cost to your expenses.
And staying on top of it. So I guess, if what I'm hearing you're saying is, we're paying down our unfunded liability over 27 years.
Yes.
I know in the city, we chose to pay off some of our side funds with PERS early and save some money. So my question is it worth it just to stay with what we're doing, or is it to our advantage financially to try and prepay any of this?
Because you made the dramatic step of ending this plan. This plan is going to end when hopefully people die in quote proper oldest first, youngest last. When your youngest employee who stays until retirement ultimately passes on, this plan is over. People hired after 2012 don't get this plan. You've already taken care of your retiree health benefits by making that dramatic change. You don't have to fund this. However, you should know that the rules are very likely to change, and GASB in a few years will say, put the whole unfunded liability on your balance sheet. You're gradually doing it over 27 years, but because of the method used before, and it was a different benefit, you're already halfway there, and it took you 3 years to get there. If it turns out that the next retiree or two declines benefits, you'll have an actuarial study in the future that shows less liability than we thought you'd have.
Gotcha.
When would you recommend that we do the next study?
Every 15 minutes you should do a new actuarial study.
So moved.
GASB requires once every 3 years, and for an agency, I'm sorry.
I was thinking half an hour, but okay.
Excuse me for asking the barber when to get a haircut.
Yeah, exactly. Every 3 years is what GASB requires. That's a good interval. If you were funding and you opted to fund through a PERS entity called California Employers Retiree Benefit Trust, where many agencies that are opting to fund, they're getting, I don't know if it's a majority of the agencies that are funding, but they're getting a lot of them. They're probably up to a few hundred now. They require biennial instead of triennial. There's no reason that they have to do this, they just do it because who deals with PERS here? Because they're PERS, they can do what they want.
Any of the board members have any questions? So we don't need a motion for this, do we need a motion to accept the report?
Yeah, and I think you've already I was doing a year-end study for the 12-13 fiscal year. So I suspect these numbers are already in your books.
Okay, so do we need a motion to accept the report?
So I'll move that we adopt the findings and recommendations for SAM, other post-employment benefits evaluation as required by GASB 45.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
I will be retiring And I'm hoping that, you know, when you do retirement work, eventually,
The next 5 minutes? Or?
no.
15.
But I'll get out of your hair. But I wanted to encourage staff or board members, I have a successor actuary, he's coming up in 4 weeks, and we're gonna have a meet the actuary get together at the Claremont Hotel, and I hope somebody can make it from your agency.
Okay.
And I'm still going to be making sure that there's smooth transition over the next 3 years, when the next actuarial sitting. I'm not gonna be doing it, I'm just gonna be making sure there's a smooth transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
I think that might be appropriate to postpone closed sessions, since we have a large audience on an issue. But I think it might be appropriate to do the consent agenda while everyone is here. Do the consent agenda first and then go on to new business, number A.
So you want to move the closed session to the end?
Yeah, I'd like to move closed session to the end.
Yeah.
So I'd like to do consent agenda now, if anyone approves of that. And then we'll go on to new business A after that. Is that
Do we
okay?
have an outside consultant here for closed sessions?
No, he actually can't be here until 8, so that works out.
That's perfect.
For the closed sessions.
All right, I would suggest a modification to your suggestion, which is that we move closed session to after item, whatever, after the item that they're all there for.
Well, let's just do one thing at a time. So let's go ahead and do the consent agenda now, and then we'll go on to 6A.
Okay, I want to hold one of the minutes, but they're not separated out, for a minor
So
correction.
you're holding 4A.
And I have a question for more information on one of the items on disbursements under 4D.
And I'd like to hold 4BA.
And I'd like to hold 4BB. So it looks like we're holding 4A, 4BA, 4BB, and 4BB.
Why don't we just
correct?
walk through them?
There you go.
There isn't much left.
So Leonard, what's your thing on 4A?
On the minutes of the January 6th special meeting, at Granada's regular December meeting, we switched SAM reps, and so the minutes show Lohman for Clark, but in fact, Lohman was changed to our regular representative at our December meeting.
So you're suggesting striking before Clark?
Right.
Okay. Anything else, Linda?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it on that item.
Go ahead, Rick.
Ellen wanted the floor.
Yeah, I pulled A.
I was gonna pull it as well, but go ahead.
Okay, the full flow report?
Yes, please.
Yeah, the flows. I'm sure it's probably addressed to Tony and to Vivian. It brought to my attention that over, from June on, we were pretty consistent around 48, 49%, 50%. Then all of a sudden in November, December, half of May jumps to almost 52% for those 2 months. And I'm just curious why we're talking about a jump of a couple of points on the flows.
You got more hotels than we do.
I don't have a good answer for you, I'm sorry.
I thought that you had previously said, or somebody had previously said that it's because of the tourists walking to Half Moon Bay in the winter when it's colder elsewhere.
We haven't had any rain, but this is a very unusual season. It could be that, but I don't have something I can put my finger on.
Okay.
But we can certainly look into it more and see if we can't ferret something like that out.
Yeah,
So-
my concern would be, as we've had in the past, where all of a sudden meters go kittywampus on us. And now, if historically this is the pattern, the trouble, I think, with history is I don't know how much valid history we have with the kind of flow meter issues we had. So I just would like staff to be able to say, hey, these are, accurate numbers, et cetera, or, gee, we see a problem here, we're gonna go verify the meters are reading right. Okay?
I would agree with that, and just to sure we're properly calibrated and that they are, okay. So I'd like to watch that.
Okay.
The thing that's interesting is all of the flows are actually down over what they were, I guess, a few years ago. I mean, half of the bays flow, 0.7 something, that looks really low to me. And so for your percentage to be 51.7, that means that Granada and Montero are also way down.
As the flows get lower, any changes, any marginal change is gonna show up with a greater sensitivity on the percentages.
Yeah. I'm just looking for staff, say everything's calibrated properly, they're accurate.
The thing that I
flows.
would note on the November flow report, if you look at that little bit of rain that we had, I mean, little bit, I mean, it was a little over half an inch. November.
We're looking at the wrong scale.
November,
I was on the
right-hand scale.
Right.
Just, if you look at the percentages on that spike, it's gonna depend on if the rain was localized more to one area than another. So say you guys got more of the cloud burst than the rest of us or not. But it wouldn't take much to move the number 1 or 2%.
Okay, let's go on to, Rick, you want to talk about?
Yeah, on
financial
4BB,
statement? 4B.
financial statements.
Yeah.
And I'm picking this spot to bring up this topic because I don't think it's anywhere else on the agenda. But it's a financial topic, which is, the directors today received an email from our interim GM indicating the fees spent on engineering in the last year, and they're substantial. They're,
We do have that on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
5C.
never mind,
Okay.
I missed that. So I guess we'll talk about it then. So I don't have any problems with the
You
4BB.
actually have this at your table, it's just too small to read.
That's for later.
It's not too small to read. I didn't read it yet.
Yeah.
Okay, but then
That's
the
fine.
Director Warren, you wanted to go into, the C,
4D.
4D.
So, yeah, okay, let's do that. There's actually some explanation. This is regarding the rather large check to CSRMA. And so there's somewhat of an explanation in the staff memo, but not quite enough for me. Where was that? It says this amount is for the, and by the way, it's almost $90,000. So this amount is for the annual renewal pool liability insurance program for 12/31/13 through 12/31/14, and a deductible recovery for claim number, something long number. This is Sam's self-insured insurance program through Sam's membership with California Risk Management Authority, CSRMA. How much of that 90,000 is our renewal versus the deductible recovery for the claim?
It's on the line.
I can address that.
Is it?
The-
Yeah, 474.35 is the
Right.
deductible recovery.
Mhm.
Very small amount.
I didn't read that section of the page. Okay. So, I guess that's enough for me. It looks like we're at the end, so I would,
Do you have a motion?
I'll move that we approve all of the items that were on the consent agenda
Second.
and all the ones that still are.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, let's go on to new business item 6A, preliminary presentation by community members and possible discussion of the concept for relocation of Kehoe water course. So we have some comments.
Let's get the.
Okay, go ahead, Leonard, you want to introduce that?
Yeah, I-
Introduce the topic.
Well, I facilitated getting this on the agenda, but I just want to make one comment before we go to the community speaker. A sure way for me to not care about what you're saying is to refer to it as a ditch, because the only difference between a ditch and a stream, and the judge in some lawsuit recently referred to it as a water course. The only difference between a ditch and a stream is that a ditch is an inconveniently located stream. So please stop calling it a ditch.
All right, let's go ahead, I apologize, Jake, you want to introduce the topic? I apologize.
Yeah. Vivian, do you want to?
Vivian, I apologize. We want to introduce the top of the item.
Oh, yes, so, this item was placed by request of, Director Warden, who is hoped by members of the community, who asked to make a presentation on relocation of the Cahill Water Course, which is located on Sam property.
Okay, thank you.
So,
All right, so we have some speakers.
Is there a presentation or no presentation?
I had thought that one community member was gonna have a prepared presentation, that was my understanding.
Well, we have, I think, five speakers. Let's go ahead and listen, hear the speakers. Florence Driscoll, please.
Good evening. I've been a neighbor of your, my name is Florence Driscoll. I live at 411 Kehoe Avenue, right across the Kehoe Water Course from the Lansford property that now is part of the Sam property. I bought the property back in October of '94, whereupon, as part of the deed, the back easement to my property was dedicated to the city of Half Moon Bay.
Excuse me, Susan, if you could ask them to be quiet out there,
Yes.
please. I got it. Thank you. Excuse me.
They're just neighbors, it's okay.
Okay, all right, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
So, okay, when I bought the property in October of '94, part of the deed was that the Kehoe Water Course, if you can call it that way, is part of the easement, which was supposedly an easement because it was supposed to be maintained by the city of Half Moon Bay, which it was at some point prior to when I bought the property. Since 1994, we've had a series of storms, and my property line has slowly fallen into the water course. So I put in retaining walls way back when, and that retaining wall needed to be reinforced by a second retaining wall, which is yet again leading. Over the course of time, the city has had it on the agenda, had it off the agenda, whatever, but they didn't follow through on doing anything that was productive enough to protect our properties and actually everyone. So we were feeling that it would be best to move the water course, hopefully onto Lunchroom property, that feasibility.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I ask for a clarification?
Yeah.
You referred to an easement, does that mean that the channel is partly on your property, within your property line?
Property line goes back, what, 10 to 15 feet? Yeah, so technically it's, you know, 10 or 15 feet beyond the fence line. So, you know, over time, it started out like about, I don't know, maybe a foot deep, way before I came here, but now it's quite deep, so.
Okay, thanks.
May I ask a clarification as
Sure,
well?
please.
So, would you support the city cleaning and maintaining the Kehoe water course?
We've attempted to try that, but there are other issues that haven't been addressed, and my other neighbors will speak to that,
Okay.
I'm sure.
Because we certainly want to do that.
Yeah, my other neighbors will speak to that.
Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker is Randy Feldhofer. Feldhofer, excuse me.
Hi, my name is Randy Feldhofer. I live at 429 Kehoe Avenue. My concern is, of course, about the water course, and again, I have the same concerns as my neighbors. Our biggest concern is the erosion, you know. Like we said, our easement, on my particular property, it's right up to the fence line now, and the ditches in my area is at least 9 feet deep and 15 feet wide. I can't see it getting any better. As far as cleaning the ditch, it's nice to get the debris and stuff out, but that's not gonna stop the erosion. That's not gonna stop the flooding, that's not gonna stop, you know, the fire hazards. So my concern is, with Sam and the city and all the other agencies concerned, that we find a solution to fix that problem. I don't know what the answer is, and that's why we're here, hoping that you guys and the city and whatever else agencies are involved, that helps us find the solution to this. We're neighbors, and we wanna be good neighbors, we wanna work together on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Patrick Johnson, I think it is.
Patrick Johnson, 431 Kehoe. I work for the city as planning commissioner, but I'm speaking solely as a neighbor and your neighbor. I've talked to Susan, I don't know if we met, but we talked over the phone, and I tried to get some records, and it was all about getting records on what was the history of the Landstra property, because I remember when it was purchased for $320,000 is what Susan got me records for. And then I talked to Leonard over the phone, and thank you, Leonard, for taking that phone call, was to get the history of why did we buy that property. And my facts could be incorrect, but I think parking lot expansion or some, I heard like a sewer line expansion. It was bought for a purpose, and then in 2005, if I'm not mistaken, the environmental impact report came in that said, well, there's some issues there, as we know, and we can't do that, we can't move on. So I'm looking at this property that the sewer plant owns, that maybe just to buy to have in the back pocket for some reason, or it was intended for something, but then found out it couldn't. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, can we do something with this Kehoe ditch and move it? And that way we can build a riparian habitat, create something that can be man-made, that could look like it was natural, and be proud of it. And have something that you guys can now say, this property now is something that the community can be proud of. Have a kiosk that shows visually of what a environment that can be man-made could look like, just like they do on the coastal trail down by the Pilarcitos Creeks. You see the kiosks there that talk about the red-legged frog and the snakes and the birds that enjoy this habitat. We could do the same. And what we could do there is we could take that erosion factor that we all have it, all the neighbors, 22 of us have the same problem. For some reason, the reports came in from the city that the city has on file, I have it on file. The right side banks are all falling down, and that's the way the engineering is, and you guys are water experts. There's this theory, and I'm not an engineer, but when the water comes down, it tumbles to the right and it takes out that right side. Well, we're the victims of the right side. The left side is not as bad, but the right side is really bad. Then you've got riparian forest that's growing, which is the willow trees, which we all know. It's there, and what's happening is they've become very large and they're taking on all the water when we have good rains. I'm not saying this year's a good rain, it's not. They become overly burdened and overly heavy. And then the winds come and they blow down, and then you've got complete fence lines coming down. We've seen it, it's happened to me. Our house, my house, was one of the victims back in the early 90s when we moved in, wiped out that whole cyclone fence. Everything was down. Randy's house, which used to be owned by Franca, same thing there. The city came in with back dredges and pulled huge machinery and got all the dirt out of there. They put a lining inside, they put boulders down, they cemented down. This is how bad it was. This is before it was deemed riparian and sensitive habitat. This is the city, is what they did. Now they've done some cleaning, of course, in due time. There was some CDP issues and some cutting of the willow trees that weren't legal, but that's another issue. But now we're trying to get beyond that and trying to get some cleaning, and to answer Rick's question, what we all feel is what we need, is what the Planning Commission has said with me recused. It said we have two issues. We have a long-term and a short-term. And they called it like the substandard thing, they called it, it was the slow train and the fast train. Slow train is basically or the fast train is, let's get some maintenance going, and that's what we'd like the city to do, and the city people here already know that. We are yes in support of that. We're trying to figure out what is legal and what is not legal, and we don't want to violate the law. So we want to make sure Mr. Benjamin knows, or he understands it. Are you okay with that? Is the is the Coastal Commission okay with that? Is the city okay with that? And we're asking for you guys to be okay with it, because we want you guys as our good neighbors to be part of this. So we want to make sure the city is in contact with you, and you are in contact with the city, and us are in contact with the fellow neighbors. So we want to be together with this whole project. The other thing is, we want to make sure that Mr. Benjamin is okay with it, and we want to do a maintenance. Long term, we want to utilize that property, and we want to try to see what you guys will do as good neighbors to maybe think of a way that we can work together on this. and that's what you're gonna hear here. Jimmy's got some ideas that we have. We have ideas as neighbors. We can call it a water course. We can call it what it was called back in the day. We can call it a new city park, or we could call it our own park. We could call it the sewer plant park. That will be something for the
There's probably a better
environment.
name than that one.
Whatever we want to call it. The bottom line is, we're looking for solutions, and we're looking for our neighbors to help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just
Yeah,
to make
sure.
a comment related to that.
Yeah.
Thanks for the comments regarding maintenance. So at the last City of Half Moon Bay Council meeting, the City Council approved unanimously, sorry, it's called ditch maintenance, but approved maintenance on 13 of 15 water pathways, if you will, in the City of Half Moon Bay. And to get those approved, we had to exempt, unfortunately, the Kehoe watercourse. At the guidance of the Coastal Commission, brought to our attention that it would clearly be opposed by, well, we all know who by. And so in order to perform maintenance on the remaining 13 water pathways, we had to exempt the Kehoe watercourse from that, so just so you're aware of that. So we're maintaining all the others. We want to maintain this one, and we'll keep trying to maintain it, and as soon as we can get to it, we will.
If I can,
Scott?
so I was on the board when we made the acquisition of the Lancaster property. And our purpose, we discussed it at considerable length at the time. The principal purpose for acquiring it was to keep it from, when this plant was developed, your neighborhood wasn't there, right? Neighborhood was developed, and now we get to be neighbors. And we get to work at being good neighbors. It would have been nice to have a plant far enough removed from neighbors that we would have a little more freedom in how we operate. But for example, we take great pains when we consider what to do with generators, for example, to try to keep them from being any more disturbing to the neighborhood than they have to be. But we have to test them every month. So we try to keep them away, as far away as we can. We try to keep them sound insulated. We try not to run them more than we need to, but frankly, we have to have the generator, so we're gonna have to do some of that. So we get to juggle that. If we were further away, some of that would be easier. So when the opportunity came up to get the Lancaster property, principal reason was to set it aside to prevent it from becoming yet another concern for us that further constrained our operations. And honestly, the price, given the zoning of that land as urban reserve, was really quite attractive. We have considered things that we might do with it. The fact that it is special habitat does limit that to some degree. There are some minor things that we might be able to do with it. I will tell you, I am predisposed towards wanting to move the water course, and have had discussions over the years about that possibility. Talked about it with someone who works for the Coastal Conservancy about how funding for something like that might work, what we might be able to achieve. And I would point you all to what the city of Pacifica did with the Clara Creek treatment plant. While it's had its problems, and be grateful from an odor perspective that you're not adjacent to that one, in many regards, it's a very forward-looking plant. They got some very good technology in there, and if they can ever manage to get some of the pressure problems figured out, what it does is remarkable. They do 3. It's a tertiary plant, meaning they have 3 major passes. We're a secondary plant, so in many respects, they're doing that much more than we are. If they've invested to do it, and it would take a lot for us to do that too, but gives us something to aspire to. And one of the things that they do is they do not discharge directly into the ocean like we do. We've got a big pipe and we pump it straight out into the ocean. They feed it into a creek bed that had gone completely dry. And now Clara Creek, you can walk along it. There's a pathway along it. It's remarkable. It's lush with life. The frogs have come back. It's a real success story. And knowing about that, knowing what they've done along the Lindemar Valley with the creek there, and some of the restoration they've done, I have great hopes for what we might be able to accomplish. It's not going to be easy, but I think I see possibilities for it, and I'm very much looking forward to that. I have to wonder when you talk about the right side bank taking the erosion and the left side not so much. I haven't gone and taken a good close look at it, but is not more of the riparian vegetation on the left side? No?
On the south side,
On the south side?
south and north.
Okay.
Honestly, the riparian vegetation is on both sides for areas where there is such vegetation.
I'm just wondering if the erosion might not happen more where there's less of it. I would hope that we would be able to build something that would be sufficiently articulated, windy, and have enough vegetation in it that erosion just simply wouldn't be the issue. Maybe wide enough that it's more fanned out than channeling deep. It would take some thought, and it would take a lot of work to make sure that we got through environmental permitting, especially with the biological impacts, for trying to, I mean, we know that red-legged frogs estivate through there, and so we'd have to do some things. But, you know, Caltrans, when they did the mitigation pond for the Devil's Slide project, they've broken some ground on what it takes to do that. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to come up with something.
Yeah, Leonard, you have a comment?
Yeah, I
We
would.
have a few more speakers to go through.
I would agree with what Scott said. I want to clarify my intent in putting this on the agenda, which was to basically hear the proposal and get a thumbs up or thumbs down from the SAM board as to whether this is something that we were interested in having further work done on, you know, to see what we can come up with, you know, so that there was no expectation on my part of having any decisions made tonight other than potentially decision, yeah, okay, let's see some more specific proposals and move forward.
Okay, let's go ahead with the other speaker. Sabrina? Sabrina, I can't see I can't read your last name. What's your last name?
Preeb.
Preeb. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. Hello, my name is Sabrina Preeb. I live on 415 Kehoe. My mom, Susan, once lived here. She and my stepdad may move back someday. Mom says we're land-rich, cash-poor. Our house is our main resource. Safe, lovely area, prime real estate. I'm disabled. I need the secure, affordable housing. As the watercourse is allowed to gouge our backyards, weaken our house foundations, and pose a flood risk, my future is jeopardized. In at least 2 past years, the water came to the top edge. Now there are plans to route even more water through the watercourse. I pray that the city fixes the Kehoe problem before we have another El Nino year, or before a prolonged drought starts a fire fueled by our vegetation-choked watercourse. Some officials have proposed planting even more trees in it. I am convinced that this would only worsen the fire hazard as well as water backup, flooding, and erosion during wet times. I battled Lyme disease for 13 years. I still have very low energy and other problems. I have few work options, no college degree, and I can only work 20 hours a week at best for low pay. At age 41, I'm likely to have more health problems later. Last year, the Social Security Administration slashed my total income by 1/3. I now get $621 a month. I've exhausted the appeals. I need my house. It's safe. I can walk or take the bus for what I need. I give my mom $6 a month for rent. If my home is flooded, could you tell me where to find safe, affordable housing for $6 a month, especially on short notice? As for selling it, who would buy a flooded house right next to a hazardous watercourse? Even now, concerns about future problems threaten our property values. Already, some of my neighbors have lost chunks of their backyards, the ground under their homes is sinking, and they're seeing moisture buildup. That's all headed in my direction. Years ago, my mom had a retaining wall put in to defend our property. It is now close to falling in to the watercourse. This hits us where we live, literally, and we have to defend ourselves. The only solution that will actually work is to move the Kehoe watercourse farther away from us with the help of the right kinds of experts who know how to save money and avoid legal complications. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Walter Sensing?
first, there's only the two of us left.
Sure, Paulette?
Because we're kind of a tag
Are
team.
you Paulette Ice?
Yes,
Okay,
Paulette.
Paulette. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you for putting this on the agenda. First of all, I really appreciate that. This has, I'll start kind of, we've only been here for 3 years. We're at 439 Kehoe. And it started for us when my husband saw, as Sabrina just mentioned, the water right up, getting very close to the top of the ditch. That got us very concerned because we had been living in Walnut Creek before and our place got flooded. We're very sensitive to that kind of situation because it was a nightmare. But fortunately, we weren't the homeowners in that situation. Now we are the homeowners. And any kind of sense of threat when it comes to flooding was something that we took extremely seriously. So then we started taking a look around, like what's going on here? There doesn't seem to be any work being done on this water course. It's, nothing is going on. We started asking around a little bit to get some information because we just walked into this totally blind. And so we thought we should attend a city council meeting. Let's see what goes on at city council meetings. So we went to a city council meeting, and afterwards we understood that Mo Sharma was is the city engineer. So we went up to him and we said, what's the story? What is the status with the Kehoe ditch? And he said to us at that point, this is something that eventually is going to have to be relocated. So he's the one that brought that concept up really to us, the first person. Somebody from the city is telling us this very thing. And then since then, in the planning commission meetings, as Patrick said, all of them agree that this needs to be relocated. Now, if there was some way that this water course could be saved in its present location, I would love to hear what the solution is. But I think everybody knows that that is not going to happen in where it is right now, because you can hear from our neighbors about the seriousness of erosion. And guess what? You can't get insurance against erosion. You could at least get flood insurance, but you can't get erosion insurance. And so maintenance of the ditch, the way the city approaches even the maintenance issue is the cleaning, and cleaning is removing things. Removing things, in fact, may exacerbate the erosion issue because it makes water move swifter and can cause further erosion rather than, well, it just doesn't take care of the erosion issue. It just doesn't address it at all. And unfortunately, that is a huge issue. Where I am in the water course area, maintenance, I want to see maintenance because where I am, if I was the only one that's the only thing I cared about was me, I would say, do the cleanup because it's going to help where I am. I haven't been experiencing much erosion. It's further down. But we got all the neighbors together, we met, everyone discussed their issues, and that's when I discovered that this isn't about just maintenance cleaning. This isn't about the inconsistent, but even if it was consistent, it just would not have worked. Ultimately, this is not working. And so it's not a viable area to have this unless it would have been maybe piped a long time ago, before riparian habitat and before all these things, and we would have had a pipe, it would have taken care of no erosion, it would have taken care of the water, it would have been great. But somehow the vision obviously wasn't there at the right time. And we now find ourselves in this situation. And this situation, you're our neighbors, you've got this land next to us. If we're going to relocate the water course, where is it going to go? it can't go the other way. So the only way it can go is onto this property. So of course, we are so glad that you were kind enough and considerate enough to put it on the agenda and for you to consider very seriously using this land for this very purpose. And I just want to take just to say if I haven't said something that's important. I don't really think so because, you know, the history is horrible. We don't want to go into the history. We really have to begin with where we are and what the realities of our situation is. So I am asking for you to give that serious consideration in terms of the use, making good use of this land. And the only other thing I want to mention, though, is there is some real concern about all the, if you've walked, we walked over here, and as we're walking over here, you know, we're seeing all this very dry, tall weeds, you know, and it's very scary because I tell you, somebody throws a match into that, it's going to go up like that, especially now. So, you know, your land, you know, good neighbors, there hasn't been any maintenance of this property yet either. And that's a concern because it's right next to ours. So, that's
Okay,
it.
thank you,
Through
Paul.
the chair, if I could ask a
Go ahead.
clarification.
Yes.
So we do maintain the land. I don't know what the frequency is, but we have a cutting annually, I believe, so that does happen. With
Do you know when
mileages
that
as
last
well.
happened?
I don't know off the top of my head.
There's an agenda item later on this, or somewhere on this agenda.
Yeah, it's 5D. We need a permit to be able to cut, and it's taken time to get the permit. We have to have an environmental assessment before we get the permit, so.
So we can't just go in and mow, but it is something we do maintain. And then the other.
We've done that every year.
We also probably need to clarify that even when it is done, we don't clear cut the property.
No.
If this is a large property and all that's required is to cut fire breaks, like, I think, cut it up into 1 acre pieces with fire breaks.
Yeah.
This was in conjunction with
I
fire
was-
department.
Go ahead.
And then the other thing is, so there's a lot of issues here, but one of them is the new meandering brook, and the other one is the water course, the Kia water course. So do you support the city doing maintenance on the current water course while you talk about these other issues, or do you not support that?
Yes, in the short term, I absolutely would like to see.
I will seek out your support and that of your
Some
neighbors
you're
when we
gonna
apply
get it,
when we
but-
apply for, when we
Yeah.
apply for a permit, because we get beaten down. And so we literally, it would have been in the last set, it would have been in this set of 15, it really would have been there. And we were advised that if you put it in there, the whole 15 is gonna get blocked.
Right,
And
no,
we want to do that.
First of all, I was completely supportive of you taking it out. You know, that was not something I was fighting at all, so let's be clear about that. I understand why, you know, why you took it out. You don't wanna hold the rest of the plan hostage to that. And I'm totally supportive of that. But I do think that there's a way with the language of exactly what it is that you would do to maintain the water course in the short term, that I don't think any control agency would have any objection to. And so I really know there's a way to do it. And honestly, I've even discussed it with Jimmy Benjamin because, you know, all of us understand the landscape. And I said, if we did this, would you end up appealing it? Would you have an objection to it? And he said no, because it's pretty simple. I mean, if we can go in at least and take out the invasive species. I don't know how a control agency would have why the Coastal Commission would have a problem with that. Man-made debris, don't see why they would have a problem with that. And the third thing that I would like to see is some kind of gauge, some kind of mechanism by which you can gauge erosion when water does go through there. If those three things, simple, nothing more, just those three things, it would start. First of all, all our neighbors that are looking to have some cleaning done in there would be happy to see that. also the fact that you are engaging, that you're addressing erosion, would have another impact for those of the neighbors who are especially affected by it.
Okay,
And-
excuse me, Paulette, did you answer?
Yeah, I'm
Yes,
good,
right. Paulette, I think you made your point.
Okay,
I really
good.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right,
Paulette.
let's go ahead with the last speaker, Walter Sensing.
Seems pretty good at that job. Hi, my name's Walter Sensing. I also reside at 439 Kehoe with Paulette, and everybody is pretty much taking my thunder, so I'm going to keep my my presentation brief. I did want to speak just a little bit about the situation that we're in with the maintenance aspect of the ditch, and the water course, and old habits die hard. I think that a lot of what we run into when we look at the city's plan to do maintenance and where it conflicts with some of the concerns that have been raised, I think the basis for which it was being appealed is the extent of which the work that was being proposed. And I think, as Paulette described, there is a point where we can have some balance of some minor not severe impacting maintenance done to lower the flood risk and not at the same time increase the erosion probability. And one of the items in particular was going in and severely cutting back the willows that have grown inside the water course and opening up basically more of a conduit for water to flow through. And unfortunately, the straight conveyance that the water course is currently on and the 25-foot elevation drop, removing things from removing the willows, which have a kind of waking effect to slow down the water, removing them, unfortunately, at this stage of the game, I think only stands to make the problem worse. So really, I think in terms of maintenance, is getting it dialed in correctly is all that we're really quibbling about. I do want to thank the SAM directors for having us here this evening, and we are all very, very supportive of trying to see the city and SAM work out some type of a compromise on the Landster property to open up the possibility to have a better thought through water course that is not going to harm anybody and enhance the habitat.
Okay.
So basically, that's all I have to say.
Well, Walter, thank you very much. Excuse me.
I have a question.
Did you have a question? Go ahead.
You said 25 feet, is that from ground level to the bottom of the channel?
From the frontage road at 45 feet to roughly here at the SAM plant.
But are you talking about surface elevation?
Surface
or-
elevation, 45 to 25 feet. It's
Wow.
above sea level.
Boy, that's not readily apparent from observation.
Right, that's right. I Googled it, and there's quite a decline, and it's down to 0 feet all the way to the ocean. So you're basically talking about 45-foot elevation decline during the whole course of the water course from the frontage road. And a lot of water moves through it at peak storm periods.
I have one other question. One of the speakers, I don't remember who, made reference to putting even more water in. What's the source of the additional water that was referred to?
Well, I'm not sure, but there's proposals on the books, at least in the works, to do something with the old Beechwood property and to put some development there. Hard to imagine that you could do that with 0 water impact moving into the Kehoe watercourse. If there's any additional construction there, the roofs and the driveways and the streets will have to have some level of runoff that will contribute into the Kehoe watercourse. And I would also offer that the proposals to widen and do additional work on Highway 1 will likely have some effect as well. And I think that those types of things offer us also an opportunity to look at
different revenue sources for trying to deal with this. Whether it be from the sale of those parcels on the Beechwood property, whether it be Caltrans, whether it be trusts and various nonprofit types of funding that we could possibly attract for a project of this nature. There might be some ways in which to offset the cost to the city as a whole.
Okay, thank you, Walter. Any board comments? Anybody?
Just like Scott said earlier, I'd be totally in favor of more discussions with Half Moon Bay or quote experts, as everybody brought up here. That I think it'd be just a great idea to help out.
Yeah.
The property just sitting out there, and we can make something of it. As both a help to all the neighbors, but help for, you know, future testing of these kinds of projects. I think it's a great idea. So I'd be totally open to
maybe a future agenda item then?
bringing this up in other agendas as soon as we can.
I agree. Anybody
Just
else?
real quick
Alan?
again, Lansford's how many acres?
It's either 6 or 7, one of those two numbers.
And again, the purpose of buying it was?
To set it aside to make sure we didn't have further encroachment.
Oh,
And
a buffer area?
Because we're kind of overflow parking onto there, and that was
Well, there was
technically trespass.
some use, but I mean, there was some loose talk about doing quite a lot of paving over there. That was never the discussion for the purchase.
But mainly a buffer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
three-
because I mean, you know, go look at other sewer plants. They all have as large a buffer as they can.
Okay. Any other board comments besides Leonard? All right, Leonard?
One thing that, one of the reasons that I insist on calling it something other than a ditch is the Kehoe Stream is actually shown on an 1860 map, and the subdivider moved it for his convenience to maximize his profits. So, you know, it goes back a century and a half. This is not a man-made ditch, it's just, we moved it. The subdivider moved it. So, you know, it's not like you can make it go away and reroute the water somewhere else. But, you know, as we've heard a number of speakers, there's really conflicting objectives. You want to avoid flooding, so Half Moon Bay goes out and clears out the vegetation, but then that increases the erosion because it's the vegetation that.
Well, I don't know what the maintenance plan is from the city. I would be surprised if it's just go in and run a bulldozer down the middle of it, right? It's not just clearing it out, and I can't speak to what the plan is, but I'm certain that whatever the maintenance, it's not just clearing it out. Because if it would exacerbate the problem, then certainly I would support exacerbating the problem. So there's no.
Well, I would certainly like to see some environmentally beneficial proposal there, and you know, one thing I saw, somebody had drawn a concept plan of having it come down basically through the center and then, you know, serious meander all the way, which, you know, has multiple benefits. It slows down the water, but because the channel is larger due to it being longer with the meander, it's going to hold more water. You know, so I'd kind of like to see some more research into the viability of doing something like that.
Yeah, a quick.
Granada gonna take it?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, actually.
Wait,
I'm
hold
sorry.
on a second. A quick comment.
Sure, I have, Leonard, I've got Tanya Ward that's an environmental, she used to work for the planning department, and that's what her expertise is, and she's willing to donate her time to work with us. And she's on board as of this Sunday. She said she's gonna work with us. So we are trying to gear up so we can do this as feasible as possible, and we have the right people in place. But I think on both sides, you can check her credibility. She's definitely worth looking into.
Can we, Vivian, can we maybe talk to Half Moon Bay and put this on a future agenda? If anyone approves that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Scott.
I do want to emphasize to your question about payment. I do believe there's some opportunity for working with the Coastal Conservancy to get some grant funding. And I'm confident that with the attention that the city is giving to it, and the maintenance plan as You are just a favorite.
There's like a fly
Why?
just like-
You're the only one.
I did shower today. But they drove me crazy.
Well, that's half and base solves that problem. No, but I'm confident that you're gonna come up with a good maintenance plan for the near term. But for the longer term, I really do believe that working with the Conservancy is probably our best bet for getting something that is gonna be a winner. I really, if you haven't looked at it, the creek in Pacifica that runs up Lindemar Valley, go take a look. There's, I'll try to think of it here in a moment, but they have a website. They show before and after. There's actually one place where you can stand on a street, a bridge that looks like a street. To one side is the restored, beautiful creek, and on the other side is this narrow, channelized, industrial, urban blight kind of thing. And the downstream now provides spawning habitat. The water's much slower, the shading is much better, so fish eggs, fry can come to.
Okay, Scott, let's go on.
Well, all right, but let me just finish my thought. So,
I'm liking this new chair.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, but as you're developing some ideas, take a look at their work. They got grant funding, they did a lot of beautiful environmental work. If you want a good example of how it can get done in a community very much like ours, they did a very nice job.
Excuse me, Patrick, did you want to give that name of that consultant to?
I'll bring it in, thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I guess we'll make that a future agenda item. All right, let's go on to, if there are no objections, we'll go on with the agenda to old business, 5.
Where's everybody going? Wait,
We have more things.
Well, we got all kinds of business here. There's some really good stuff here.
Is there good stuff in there?
No.
Okay.
Bad enough we gotta suffer for it, not you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for coming.
Let me check with, excuse me.
We'll get caught up on TV.
Is the consultant here for the?
Yes.
Should we go ahead with closed session, or do you think we
You wanna
should just go
finish
ahead
up?
and finish all old business? Let's go ahead and finish all business first. So, old business, item A, conduct public hearing on proposed non-domestic waste source control, NDWSCP fee schedule for year 2013 and 14. Go ahead, Vivian.
Yep, so this is our non-domestic waste source control hearing, and so the first action is to open the hearing, and I can do that, or
Okay, well, why don't you go ahead and open.
normally do that? And then for the managers and secretary statements, just want to confirm that the district or the agency did duly notice the hearing in 2 publications, one on December 4th and the other on December 11th of 2013. So with that, I think we can move to public comment.
Okay. Is there any public comment?
Were there any written comments submitted?
We have not received any written comments.
Okay.
I
I
would
move that we
close the public hearing.
That's second.
Okay.
Beat you by a quarter of a second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Okay, so item B, adopt resolution, next in sequence, establish schedule of fees for use in conjunction with NDWSCP for year 2013 and 14.
I heard a so moved.
You have a motion? You have a
Second.
You have a second? Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And item C, receive information on general engineering services expenditures as compared to budget for year 2013-14.
Yes, this item came up in November. We had preliminary information that showed that there would not be a refund to member agencies for the O&M budget fiscal year 2012-2013. And there was discussion at that time that the reason why the expenditures exceeded budget was primarily because of the engineering services charges. The board requested a detailed list of charges that had been paid, and so the attached spreadsheet, which is, and I apologize for the small print, shows the charges with the totals across the top and also the various projects across the top and the dates of the payments down the left. And then I also provided a summary in email. So some of these projects have been approved, the Granada Forest Main Rehab, the wet weather storage project support, the number of digestive cleaning, the number of these other projects were as needed and completed upon request by the general manager at the time, and the various payments were approved by the board over the various 12 months in fiscal year 2012-13. This is provided generally for information only. We do have, now that the other post-retirement, post-employment benefits evaluation has been completed, we do plan to finish the audit and present the audit to the board for action in February, and at that time, questions related to these charges or other charges for fiscal year 2012-13 would be addressed.
All right, so any board comments?
Now, some of these are rather substantial projects where the engineering is just a slice of the overall cost. Do we have, I think it would be helpful to have, for example, the Granada Forest Main Rehab and the wet weather flow management projects, to have the overall cost so we can get a kind of some perspective on these numbers. They look large, but against the backdrop of the full project cost, I'm not so sure.
Which for that one was, if I recall, 1.3 million.
So this is, I'd like to have the perspective on that.
What's it again, Scott? I'm following you. I want to follow what you're saying.
Big projects have big budgets,
Yeah.
so we may look at a number like the 138,580 on the Granada Forest Main Rehab. Against the cost of the project as a whole, as a project, I'd like to have the overall project cost.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Upper left corner, Granada Forest Main Rehab, 138.
Oh, column header.
Column header.
Right below the column header is
Yeah.
the total for the project for the engineering.
So, all right, I have some comments. This is Austin Share. First of all, the spreadsheet is very helpful, thank you. And it's about as readable as a spreadsheet gets, so, sorry, Leonard, I know you don't like that. Besides, but that's-
Reading glasses.
I think they're called spreadsheets, that's just what they are. So, when you do the math on this and see the total funds spent in engineering, that really is a substantial sum. And I think it would behoove us to, just from a financial perspective, to look at, I don't know, either have our interim director or Parsons or somebody provide, I'd like to see, well, I was surprised by the number. I was very surprised by it. It's very substantial,
So,
$500 million. But that's
is
my
it-
point, but,
okay.
but, because we have a purchasing policy, right? That, I think was a $30,000 cap when you have to go out and, but I really feel that, I'm left with the impression that a lot of this stuff is, oh, it's ongoing, nickel, 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 nickel. All those nickels add up to 25 cents, then add up to $500,000 eventually. And I'm wondering if there are other areas where this occurred. And I think it might be helpful if we saw 2012 and 2013, what vendors we spent more than, I don't know, $20,000 or $30,000 in total for each of those years, and see what we come up with. I think that would be pretty insightful, because I'm concerned that we're doing a lot of nickel, 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 and to pay for things that we need in the moment, but then in the grand scheme of things, I look at this, I immediately say, okay, if we have $500,000 in engineering costs, then I wanted to RFP for engineering services and get some preferential treatment for that and some preferential rates, because that's a big block of dollars and hours. So I think I understand that one.
I would note that the first two columns are projects of substantial size that account for half of this amount. Things that we had budgeted, and I would like to remind everybody that with the wet weather flow management project, in years past, we had people advocating for a $16 million project. So I look at the $94,000 for that project against the backdrop of what that project cost overall, and I'm going to note on a percentage basis and against what we were looking at as an alternative. That was an anticipated and much better cost than what could have been. So I would urge my colleagues to keep in mind that a number of things here are project, and those are going to have larger numbers. The things I would be much more concerned in terms of the spending the nickels would be things like the as-needed engineer support. There, I would like us to have in mind what we think a reasonable ongoing engineering support month-to-month figure might be. Set some expectations about that. Is it, I mean, it kind of looks like it comes out to 5,000 in many months, and then in some months, nothing at all. But that's one, that to me is the other category, or the miscellaneous. It's $50,000 in the year. That's something where I think if we really want to budget $50,000, then we should budget $50,000, and if we're not happy with that number, we should budget something less. That's the kind of thing, you know, I look at the digester cleaning project, again, there I want to look, is it a reasonable percentage against the cost of the project? Does it meet with the kinds of numbers that we get when people bid? Because we know what we expect in terms of engineering support on projects that are bid. We can go back and take a look at these and see how they fared against what we would have anticipated putting them out to bid.
Yeah, Scott, I think that's all solid. I concur with that. But I think my bigger point is about leverage, is that if in total we're spending $500,000 for engineering services, then that is leverage we have to negotiate for preferential rates overall, okay, scheme of things. And I think we should, I know what that is and do that.
I wonder, are engineering services ever done, you know, for the miscellaneous small stuff, are they ever done on a retainer type arrangement?
Retainer, like you buy so many hours per month?
Well, basically, to lump all of the small stuff together for a fixed monthly charge where, you know, all the minor stuff would be included in that, and then the big things would be separately billed. I don't know if it's ever done.
What's typically done, and like how we wound up with SRT, it was actually Olivia Chen when we first struck an arrangement with them at Montero, was we did the RFP, we had, I believe, 5 engineering firms make proposals. I was on the group that went through these proposals. They were all like this thick. We did interviews. We made a choice. We wound up with Olivia Chen. At some point, Olivia Chen, the big company went one way, a smaller group spun off into SRT. We wound up there getting very attractive rates, even over what Olivia Chen had given us, which was one of the key considerations that we chose Olivia Chen for. So in the time that we've had SRT, we've looked at other engineering firms. But basically, we picked a staff engineering firm and put that work through that firm, picking and choosing wisely where we actually wanted to spend the money. So in some respect, the engineering firm of record for SAM a dozen years ago was Corolla, and we know what that was like. And if this was Corolla that we were looking at, I'd be leading the charge. And Leonard would be racing, he'd be crawling over my head to be out in front of me on this, because we know what it's like to have the large engineering firm that, and this was after they had done the plant expansion. You'd think we would have gotten some more appropriately sized pricing.
More evidence
projects.
to my point that they don't give it to you unless you go and get it.
Well, that's true.
I don't think
That's
we need
true.
to go and get it in this case.
This is a long way around to say that I've been watching this from the very beginning and keeping an eye on what other engineering firms charge. And if I thought that we weren't already getting pretty decent pricing, I'd be out there. But to go through things, we've got to know that we're going to get something substantial. And I don't believe that there's that much more to be had by doing that. That's one reason I want to take a look at the percentages on the big projects. because this is one place where it's very easy to see how does this measure up against RFPs that we see go out in similar projects. Because that's where you see it.
You know, what?
Wait, hold on a second. Rick, are you?
So I'm interested, and I agree with your comparing it to the percentage of the whole. So I guess the sentiment of the board, would you support directing the interim GM to collect data from 2012, 2013 on the firms that we spent $30,000 or more on in those years, so we know where all the nickels got added up to.
You mean beyond just engineering?
Vendors.
Vendors.
These are all the engineering.
I'm sorry, vendors, yes, vendors.
We're going to see CalCon, we already had that discussion, right?
And are there
Well,
others?
it's fine to look at. I would think since we're an engineering company.
I would also
engineering
like to
would be
see,
high.
I would think so too.
I hate to say this, but I'd like to see one more column on this, which is the percent column Scott's suggesting. So basically it would be the amount column divided into the total project cost, which isn't shown here.
Well, I'd also like to see this segregated by projects that were, well, I think it's just.
It's growing.
Well, no, it's not right to put, for example, the electrical reliability study next to something that we had been planning for 10 years. You know, the electrical reliability study was something that came up, we had an urgent need to take a look at it very quickly. Whereas the wet weather project, we've been working on for 10 years.
So that's actually a great example of $15,000 spent on engineering. See that my flag?
Yeah, thank you for sending your scourge over here.
Flies at the sand plant? How could that be? That's actually a great example of $15,000 spent on engineering to move the study to move the electrical station from the flood zone to a different place in the flood zone. I
don't follow, since the recommendation was to put it above ground on an elevated structure at the highest point inside the fence.
Within the flood zone. So
well, the whole plant's in a flood zone, but
it doesn't solve that. It doesn't solve the problem. Anyway,
it's not flood zone.
Actually, that is
Okay,
not
so-
what that recommendation.
Okay, so does the board want to give directions to the?
Well, I think we're asking for
Hey, Rick,
a modification of the
Spurge back.
spreadsheet.
Can you have that mounted, please?
Yes.
For summary, so you.
So asking for total project cost on the projects, and then segregating the projects from the rest of the work. And I really don't want to see the whole number, except as if we were to do the thing to look at vendors over a certain amount, then that's where we'd see that.
Well, so the whole number's helpful, because then we could say, so,
How
in
much?
the last 3 years, we spent around $500,000 in engineering services, so we will give you, we'll give preference to your firm, but now we want these rates. Otherwise, we don't give preference to your firm. And guess what happens? You get better rates. So the.
Perhaps.
Or not, but if you don't ask, you don't get. So,
Well,
but the other, so.
But the thing I would encourage, really strongly encourage, it's no mystery. We can go look at the billing rate schedule anytime, and I have. And so I'm, ongoing with these things. I've got a sense of where we are with this thing, and so it's no mystery. I don't need to go look again, because I know what it looked like the last time I looked, which was recently. So when we look at the billable hours for the different levels of professionals who are doing the work, and then the distribution of those hours between principals and other staff, are we getting a reasonably good deal? Is there a whole lot to be gained? How much? What percentage would you want to see on?
There's the deal, then there's, are you getting a good rate, and are you getting a good value? And but I think we've given direction for the spreadsheet, and the other direction I'd like to give with concurrence of the board is to get a list of all vendors that we spent $30,000 or more with in each of the last 2 years.
I want to ask for one more thing.
Do we concur with that?
Does the board agree with that?
Yeah, you said everything over
30,000.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Can we get a simple pie chart showing how much of our budget goes to, say, salary, how much goes to benefits, how much goes to chemicals, how much goes to engineering? I think that'd be an
It's just the,
Is that coming
it's
up
just the
with
totals
other-
from the major budget sections into a chart.
That's probably already there somewhere.
I wanna point out again, you know, last time we talked about engineering, I mentioned this, but one of the reasons that some of us basically eased Carollo out the door and eased SRT in is because Carollo is always looking to make a big project bigger, and SRT understands that we like small projects made smaller. And so when you're picking an engineering firm, you gotta be really careful about that. You know, we don't want another Carollo that's always looking for how to make a $5 million project into a $10 million project.
And he's not kidding about that. I can show you the proposals, and they were very, very well done.
Granada's previous engineer from Kennedy Jenks used to go to engineering conventions and, the wastewater conventions and stuff like that, and publicly accused the Carollo engineer of doing exactly that.
All right, so I think we give direction, we're all set. So let's go ahead and go on to 5, old business. D, authorized payment of revised CDP fees for annual weed abatement.
This item was brought to the board for a consultant to manage the environmental aspect of our landscaping maintenance. And since that time, we have moved to a different consultant, and I think Tony actually got a lower price from that firm, so Tony can provide information to the
So at the November meeting, we asked, we had used HT Harvey in the past, and we asked if we could use them again, and so we contacted them, and we actually found their original report, but it happened to be outdated, too far out, too old. So they made a proposal to redo that, and it actually came out a little bit less. And it still has to go through the city, but now it is about $350 less. And it's HT Harvey. And they're ready to go.
Sounds good to me.
Given their experience and how non-eventful their work has been, I have a preference for that.
Are we just, how often are we cutting the weeds now, once a year?
Every June is the schedule.
Okay, I mean, I agree with the neighbors, I mean, they're extremely high. Should we maybe look at, I don't know if we get the permit one time, but maybe cut twice a year?
The issue, previous manager worked out the whole plan of how we do it with the fishing game and all that, and it comes down to activity levels of the critters we're worried about. And it's June that they're both at the same time, very low activity.
All right.
And then there's also how much we can cut. And the last time we did it, and we only went along the road and along the frontage road. We didn't do the acre. And the fire
It's kind of like
department-
fire breaks?
And the fire department was happy with that.
Okay. I agree with that comment, I mean, it's bone dry, and I would hate to see something happen and we're like, well, we can only do it once a year or something. Because I don't think we're looking at any substantial water in the near future for what you keep hearing, so I think we should be.
Wait until Friday and see what
Well,
happens.
yeah, but I think we should be very sensitive to that issue, so we don't end up with something bad happening.
Okay. All right, so we still have closed session. Should we go ahead and finish the open session agenda?
Oh, wait a minute, there's an action on.
It's
the
provide
action,
direction.
sorry.
If we're agreed, then I think we've provided direction.
Okay, sure. Do we need a motion to authorize payment?
I move that we provide direction to the interim general manager to proceed with H.G. Harvey as described.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so since we've gone so far.
I'd be in favor of, yeah, just finishing all the regular.
Let's finish the
Everybody go
regular.
home except.
Okay, so
Close your
new
hand.
business, B, review and approve schedule for 2014 SAM board meetings.
It's a lot of them.
And it's one a month, right?
12.
Just like last year.
It's just when you see it all at once, right, you know.
This is kind of a long-term commitment, is that what we're talking about?
So does anybody
Well,
have any?
I'm going for 16 years, so, that's,
Okay, so,
bring it on.
Well, let's point out that the last two are the beginning of a week with a holiday later in the week, and what annoys me more than rescheduling the meeting is waiting until the month before the meeting and then rescheduling it.
So let's,
you know, if
what do you
people are gonna-
propose? What do you propose?
I propose keeping the dates, but that means not coming back, you know, 9 or 10 months from now and saying, I don't wanna meet that week. So, you know, either we're gonna agree.
Okay, you
to-
know that December 22nd is unlikely, right? So let's pick a different date.
How about a week before? How about the week before for each of them?
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna make that November 17th and December,
Somebody call me, let me know, so I don't forget.
15th.
Is that 15th? I don't have a calendar.
And I'm staring at the calendar here, so.
7 days less, looks like 15.
Minus,
Okay.
So.
Mr. Chairman, I think
Yeah.
whenever you've done this in the past, you've done something now, understanding that if something comes
Yeah.
up and you want to continue on a different date, you can certainly do that.
Okay.
What's the thinking on May 19th being the third Monday? Wouldn't it ordinarily be on the fourth Monday?
Which would be what?
The 26th?
Maybe
It's
Memorial
a
Day.
holiday, Memorial
Oh,
Day.
oh, so, okay.
All right, so we can always change dates. Is everyone, do we need to have a motion to approve?
What is it, so 11/17 and
Yeah,
what,
so
12/15?
I move that,
Yeah, 12/15,
Yes.
right.
with those two modifications, we adopt this schedule.
Second.
Okay.
Third.
All right, let's go on to
Oh, we have to
interim.
take a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, interim manager's report. Vivian.
So I listed a few items under item 7 in the board agenda, just to give the board an idea of what we have going on. For the wastewater treatment plant, the managers are scheduling a meeting to walk through the plant and prioritize capital maintenance and capital improvements, as we did with the pump stations. And that meeting hasn't been scheduled yet. We decided to do that, try to do that in-house as opposed to going out.
Could you also publicize those dates? 'Cause
Yes.
now that I'm local on it, some of us can jump in and
Yeah.
combine tours.
Okay. We did have a request for qualifications for work at the plant so that we could get, the plant has a lot of specialty items, and although SRT has provided good service to the agency, they may not have expertise in all of the specialty items that we need, and it's very important that these items get addressed correctly for regulatory reasons. So we send out an RFQ to obtain the special, at least names of consultants with those specialties such as electrical and some process specialties, and we've received two statements of qualifications, and both of them have a number of subs in them, so through that process, we've received quite a few names of consultants that we can look to for some of this work.
But SRT
Can we
has
see those,
subbed out-
please?
Pardon me?
Can we see those, please?
Yes,
SRT has subbed out something or other in the last year.
yeah, they subbed out electrical, they suggested one electrical engineer, and they also have Calcon as an instrumentation engineer. So even though we received two, we actually received, quite a number of names to work with.
Good.
So we'll provide those to the board.
Okay.
I plan to do the same thing for pump stations, so that we can also get a broad group in case we have special expertise that's needed at the pump stations. We are completing, and thankfully, unfortunately for drought conditions, but thankfully for flow conditions, we haven't had a lot of rain. We had been meaning to put in emergency bypass capabilities this winter, so that we had something in place in case we had big wet weather, and that plan is in place for very little cost. We can put in the ability to hook up pumps at 2 of the pump stations, so that's ongoing.
Could you repeat that? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, so at
a
two-
bypass?
Yes.
A pump attached to.
What specifically would be bypassed?
So the flows, so let's say we lost power at Princeton, we could actually, now have a concept to put in the capability to quickly hook up trailer pumps and bypass around the station so that we don't overflow the station, and the same at Montera. And we also looked at Portola, and we looked at the effluent pump station. The configurations of those stations are more complicated, and so something can't be put in quickly there. But but we did look at those just to make sure that that was the case.
And how complicated is that, how long does that take to get, call in and get set up? Is that?
Well, it depends on how we work it. In terms of the piping work, it's at Monterey and Princeton, it's fairly straightforward. We have to determine whether or not we want to rent the pumps for the whole season. They can be costly.
Okay.
And keep them here, or have an agreement where they can get them here quickly. We haven't worked all that.
Okay, all right. Okay.
These are like portable pumps on wheels?
Yes.
Right.
Probably a semi.
Could be.
For administrative activities, currently I am working with Wiley WPR, Wiley Price Radulovich, to complete an administrative policy for the non-represented employees that reflects what we have in the MOU for the represented employees. So we're working on that. And also working with Susan on our other policies to try to update our current policy book. And then as far as interagency meetings, the managers are meeting, but we've also been asked to attend a meeting in February. What is the name of that group?
Emergency services.
Yeah, they're emergency, the group that coordinates emergency services for the area. I can't remember the name of the group.
It's changed a couple of times. I can't remember.
There may be somebody in the audience who knows.
Midcoastside, yeah, Midcoastside.
Midcoastside, emergency action plan. Keep, is that what you're talking about?
Keep, that's right, Keep. So we will be attending their meeting first Friday of February.
Oh.
Could you go back to the first item? I didn't quite, it wasn't clear. So the priority for the CIP, the budget, you said that you're going to, you haven't met with the other engineers or the other chief general managers yet.
Right.
But you're gonna be doing that.
Yes, so we have walked through the pump stations and looked at critical needs for the pump stations, but haven't really done that for the treatment plant. I mean, we have some ideas that have been bantered about, but have not really come up with a list of critical items.
Okay.
The current CIP does not address risk, and so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to bring risk into the plan so that the agency is spending its money on the highest risk items first. The current CIP is fairly random and it's primarily maintenance items. And so the managers got together, we could either have a consultant do that for us, and we would send an RFQ or use the current statements of qualifications, or we thought we could go out there first and try to figure out what we need ourselves and maybe bring a consultant in to help us refine, and that would save cost to the agency.
Okay. What's your timeline for doing that at this point?
February, we'll do that walkthrough in the month of February.
Okay, and then you'll report back to the board.
Yes.
And if I can offer a comment, I do appreciate the walkthrough before engaging the consultants. I think it makes, I know when I do that kind of thing with my consultants, gives me better ability to manage the consultants.
Yeah, I appreciated that for Tony and Vivian gives that tour.
It was an eye-opener.
There's one thing I think we need to add to the list here. CCWD had a fire in the office, electrical fire, and they sent out another notice today that they're going to be closed for a few more days than they originally stated. So my request would be to have our technical services manager get some specifics as to exactly what happened there, and then report to this board whether we're at risk or why not of a similar incident. I think they lost all their computers, is what it sounds like from the latest update. So, you know, let's make sure that it can't happen here. We need to find out exactly what it is that happened there. And so, you know, potentially that could change the mix in the CIP stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right. We should look at the building just as we do all the other facilities.
Because, you know, a fire in that office, that's not near their treatment plants. And so the treatment plants are independent and they keep running, but a fire here could shut down the plant.
Okay. All right, anything else? So we go on to budget preparation update.
Yes, so we're diving into the budget now, and I have received from Parsons what they call the spine, which is an accounting of the money spent for the first half of this fiscal year, so that we can plan for the next fiscal year. I have looked at it. I need to get together with Tony and Jeanette and Kevin from Parsons. I would like to approach the budget a little differently this year. It seems like the prior budgets were really based on just an escalation of previous costs. And I'd like to really think, especially in terms of the operations and maintenance expenditures, what we really need to do, make sure that what we really need to do is covered in the budget. So we don't, end up at the end of the year looking at something like this. All of these things we really needed to do, but we just didn't budget for them. I think we can, with the CIP list, we can anticipate quite a bit of what we really need and get the real numbers out to you. So there's going to be a little bit more detail at staff level before we come to you with a budget workshop.
Okay. All right, and anticipated managers items for February agenda, computer purchase policy.
The computer purchase policy, I plan to bring that to the February agenda along with the draft code of ethics. These are all items that have been discussed previously.
Okay.
And hopefully a completed personnel policy.
Okay, thank you. All right, attorney's report.
Mr. Chairman, you have my written report in your agenda, so I'll go through this quickly. The first matter, we had a speaker presentation on public records in the digital age, and that fits right into this, into the computer policy that your manager is working with, because the purchasing of computers, the use of computers, the use of personal computers, the newspapers, there's just more and more push to get more and more access to the communications among public agency officials. So it all sort of interrelates, and we just have to get this thing as current as possible and just be diligent on that. The other thing is emails and the lack of judicious use of emails. And then the next thing you have is a request by a plaintiff's counsel somewhere for all the emails from him. And that can get very complicated, first of all, very burdensome, but also somewhat embarrassing in some occasions. So we're gonna try to fit that into your purchase policy, your computer purchase policy as well.
Can you give us a report at some point on what the state of the law today on that is, and what it is likely to be tomorrow?
No. This is kind of like your earlier speaker on the, what was his term, when you're gonna die and all that, or whatever that stuff. I mean, this is in flux, and these newspapers are just moving around, trying to get what they can. I mean, 5 years ago, you would not have thought you had to release personnel salaries of all your individuals. Now that's done as a matter of course. So this thing is evolving very fast, but we can give you some read on that. Probably the best we can do.
But the potential problem is the agency doesn't supply us computers, and so for somebody to say, give us all the mail on your personal computer, they can go take a long walk off a short pier.
So are you trying to say that if you receive the mail on your personal computer, that it becomes vulnerable because it gets subject to?
There is a newspaper claiming
I'm just asking
that.
you if that's what you're saying.
There's a newspaper making that exact claim as of a year ago or less.
And that's the problem with giving it in, because this stuff's in limbo right now.
So there's no precedent right now?
Well, there's yesterday's precedent may not be good enough for trying to plan in the future. But
Alrighty.
the whole invasion
So to be
of
safe, we should get all of our mail through written correspondence, mail through the postal service?
When I try, to me, the whole concept of email's gotten totally out of control, and there's too much being put in email. And just keep in mind that your emails are potentially subject to somebody else looking at them. Discoverable. And if you would not want that discovered, then keep it out of the mail. We can talk about a time and place of a meeting, but just, that's it. Keep it to what you don't mind somebody else looking at.
Okay.
And I'm just saying, going back to Leonard, the newspapers and some of these other agencies are continually pushing because they see instances where there have been violations. And that's the worst case. It's, you know, the one bad public agency is the one that makes the press, and nobody else gets reported. So, and like Leonard was saying, there's a case out there right now on this very point, on these kind of computers, information on computers. Second thing is legislation, and as we have predicted, the environmental legislation and the inverse condemnation legislation didn't go anywhere. There has been a little bit of opening, Section 1090 on conflict of interest. There's been a little bit of improvement on that law, which is a very serious offense.
So what direction is the?
You can request information from the Fair Political Practices Commission in advance. Rather than being exposed to something, you can at least go and prophylactically request whether this is a violation of 1090. That was not in the statute.
So they didn't actually change what's a 1090
No.
violation or penalty,
No.
right?
Okay. Still, the issue we've reported on before, volumetric pricing, they're still pushing that, and I suspect with droughts and all this stuff, there's going to be an opportunity for the regulatory authorities to push harder on volumetric pricing for wastewater agencies, just like water agencies do. The big wastewater agencies, Orange County Sand, LA County Sand, East Bay Mud, are fighting this because it will be an administrative nightmare to administer.
Sure.
Then the last one on this recent case is a good one. In fact, the city attorney from Halfmoon Bay is involved in this one. The case law Griffith v. Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency, challenge under 218, and whenever I see a favorable opinion under 218 for the public agency, I want to bring it to your attention. So this is one of those. And all kinds of these challenges under 218, hopefully you guys don't get into these, but they allowed you to anticipate projects in the future and factor those into your rate base. And the court said that was okay. That's a fair part of cost of doing business, is to anticipate, like we were talking here earlier tonight about some of your anticipated costs. You'd like to go back to your public agencies and factor that into your rate base going forward. And they said that was okay. And then lastly, this is for the staff as well, these SSO audits. Continuing to hear horror stories on SSO audits, and that's just something for the staff to be sensitive to. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, director's reports?
Nothing for me.
Anybody? Alan? Okay.
One future one real quick. February 4th, a couple Tuesdays from now, we have our quarterly Special Districts Association meeting, which is the whole county. Of interest to folks around here, besides our speakers, Supervisor Tissier, the agency presentation will be by our own local SAM agency. So they've been politely coerced into making a presentation. I got Tony to sort of volunteer. I'll be chatting with you this week about it.
So you've got Tony to volunteer by saying everybody who's not volunteering take 2 steps back and pass it up.
Well, he was being polite on the phone. He realized he couldn't hang up because he'd already started talking.
All right, any other director's reports? If not, any public comment or communication? If not, we'll recess into closed session, but before we do, can we have, does the board wish to have Tony and Vivian attend again, closed session?
I do.
I think it'd be useful.
Okay.
I'd also like a 5-minute recess.
Okay, let's have a 5-minute recess. Jim, can I talk to you for a minute?
I'm always good.